In this episode, we're going to take the time to build out the header with the global context, as well as all the styled components needed to build the preview that you see on the screen. I also want to take this time to thank everybody for all the support. I try to read every single comment out there, and we're almost close to 3,000 subscribers, which is honestly amazing. Again, thanks everybody for everything, and let's get started with this video. We're going to get things started in our layout.js. I do have the starter branch cloned and I ran gatsby develop. Here's what you'll see on the screen. Now, the very first thing we're going to do is create our global styles. We're also going to add normalize with a theme provider for our dark and light theme. We're then moving on to header.js, where we're going to code the JSX, as well as create two style sheets or styled components for the header component, as well as a global component styles. We're then going to set up the context API so that we could have a global state. And then we're going to add the option from toggling the current theme, as well as a bit of animation with framer motion. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. What we're going to do first is create a global style sheet from styled components. And to do this, let me just add a comment. We're going to import create global styles, and we're importing this from styled components. Now this will create a global style sheet that we can use across the app. We're just going to create a variable and call it global style, and global style will use that create global style. And we're going to use backticks here. And the styles that I'm going to add first is I want the entire application to have a text decoration of none so that we can get rid of anything that has text decoration already on it. And we're also going to set the cursor to none, but we're going to comment this out for now until we build our custom cursor component. Next, we can do HTML. We're going to make box sizing and set this to border box, and we'll set the font size to 16 pixels. Now, I'll also want to add font smoothing to anti-aliased. So I'll just add a WebKit font dash smoothing, and I'll set that to anti-aliased. We're then going to tackle some styles for our body. We're setting the font family. Next, we're going to set the background to a white color, adding an overscroll behavior of none and an overflow -x to hidden. This will get rid of any scroll on the x-axis. Okay, so we've got global styles set up, and I think this is all we really need. One thing I do want to import, actually, one of the packages we installed was normalize. So what we can do here is import normalize, and we'll just import this from styled-normalize. And normalize would just kind of add default styles and reset the browser for us. So the way to use this with styled components is that we can just import normalize through the global style variable that will create the style sheet. Now, to get this plugged in, we'll need to return the global style as a component in our return. So we can get rid of this here and then just add React fragments. We can just leave it like that. And then we'll return global style. And then we can add back what we had before with the main, returning the children, so that anything that's wrapped around this layout component, which would be the pages, it would return each page within this main div. So it seems like we need to add that there. Okay, now let's take a look at what we have. And so you can see that nothing really changed all that much, except that the text did differ from what we have originally, and that we don't have any padding or margin on the body due to normalize. So if I get rid of normalize here and refresh, you can see that the padding and or margin is added back to the body. So let's go ahead and add normalize back in and save that. Now, I also want to wrap our entire application or our layout component with a theme provider. And what theme provider will allow us to do, which comes from styled components, is set up a theme for our site so that we can access different variables, whether that be different types of colors, different widths that we add to properties. We can create a theme provider that will be accessible in our styled components for when we make them. To use theme provider, we're going to import it from styled components, and we'll need to wrap our return statement here with a theme provider. So we can leave it like that, and we'll need to pass in theme. And what theme we'll take in is a theme we create. We're getting an error right now because the / on the wrong end. So add it to the front. And so this theme, we are going to create two types of themes. We're going to create a dark theme and a light theme. So we'll create a const dark theme, and all dark theme is going to take is a background of black and a text variable and a text of white. Now we'll do the exact same thing, but we'll flip it for our light theme. So instead of this dark theme, we'll switch it to light theme. And for the background, we'll just switch this to white and switch the text to black. For the moment, we'll only just pass in dark theme. But essentially, when we set up our global state, we'll toggle between dark theme and light theme. Go ahead and save this. And to check if this is working, what we could do is scroll all the way to the top to our body. And for background, instead of the FFF, we can then access the themes variables or properties we have here and set them to a certain color. So since we have dark theme for our global theme, what we can do in background is pass props, and then we'll want to get the props.theme.background. So this will capture the background property of our dark theme, making the background of our entire application black. So let's go ahead and save this and preview, and you can see that it switched back to black. So we can also test this with the light theme. If we are to switch this theme from a dark theme to a light theme, our background should then switch to a white color, as it does. And so this is sort of the way that it's going to work for our entire application's light theme versus dark theme, or like dark mode versus, I guess, normal or light mode. We'll have a toggle that will switch between the dark and the light theme. And every time we switch it, we'll store that to local storage so that when the user leaves the site or closes the browser and comes back, the theme that they have selected previously will save. So now that this is working, we can then move on to Header.js, to where we'll code out the JSX and create additional styled components. In the components folder, let's go ahead and create a new file, and we'll call this header.js. Now a shortcut I like to use in VS Code is RAFCE, and this will allow us to create a React component. However, it does take the file name into consideration. So I did not capitalize header, which means I do need to capitalize it for our component. Now with header, we could just return header right here. And if we go to index.js, which is in our pages, you can already see that layout is already being wrapped. Now I can add header.js here, but then that means it would only exist in the home page. If I want the header component to exist throughout our entire site, we will need to wrap it in our layout.js. So scrolling to the top, I'll create a section here to where we'll import our components, and I'll first import header, and we're just going to import it from header. Now I will return header after the global style and before this main for the children prop, and I'll simply just add header here. And now it should say header at the very top. Now back in our project, we can get back inside header and start building our header layout. So as we're going, you'll see me just make up random names for our headers. And so these kind of just follow class names. So in styled components, you can use class names, but typically you'll want to wrap reusable components using the styled components method. So if I were to name a class name header-nav, using styled components, what I'll do instead is the following. So I'll just create a header nav like so, and then this will serve as my div. To keep things simple, I am going to add some text in here, and I'll call this header. And what should happen is an error should occur, which it does. It tells me that header nav is not defined. So we need to create header nav. To do so, we're going to need to import styled from styled components. Not styled normalized, but components. So what we do here is write a variable of const header nav, and we'll set this to styled.div and add some backticks. So what we could do here is just add a background of blue. We'll leave blue violet and a color of white. If we were to save this div right here that we created, that's a styled div, will then have the background color of a blue violet and a color of white. So if we check it out, you can see that blue violet and white here, which this blue violet does look a lot like Gatsby's color, which is pretty interesting. But that's the very basics of creating styled component. And now while this is lovely, we can also move this in different areas. So we can add the styled components here at the very bottom, and everything still works like we want it to. But I'm not a huge fan of this, to be honest. I like to separate my styles, and to separate them, what I'm going to do is create a folder and call it styles. And inside this folder, I'll create a header styles.js. And this will allow me to write all my styled components related to the header component in this file. And then I'll simply import them in header.js. So I am going to grab that and add it here. And I'll also need to grab the import of styled components and add it in our header styles. Now I also need to add an export. And now what I could do is create a styled components comment and import all the styled components that I need for this header component. So we need header nav, and we're going to import this from styles/header styles. If we save this, everything should work just like we hope it would. Now let's go back in header.js and continue. We'll go ahead and remove this header text, and we'll create more styled components. So another component that I need to create is a container component. And inside the container component, I would like to create a flex component, which would represent flex boxes. And inside this flex component, we can create a logo component. And inside the logo component, we'll actually keep things simple for now, and we'll update it later, but we'll just add the text of logo. And so outside of this logo component, but still being inside this flex component, we'll create another component and just call it menu, and we'll just write menu as a text here. And inside menu, we'll add a button with 2 span tags. So just go ahead and add 2 span tags like so. Now we're going to get a bunch of errors because none of these components are defined, but that's what we're going to do next. First things first is we need to define the container in the flex. This calls for us to create another file, and we'll call this global styles.js. And what global styles.js is going to be a set of components that we're going to reuse across several other components, meaning the container, the flex, etc. Now we'll need to import styles, and I'm going to copy what we have for header already and just import it there, but we'll change this to container, and we'll add another one specific to the flex. Now with container, we'll add a flex-grow of 1, a margin of 0 auto, a padding of 0.32 pixels, a position of relative, a width of auto, a height of 100%, and we'll also throw in some media queries. So I'll add @media, and we'll do min-width of 1024 pixels, and we'll set the max-width for our container to 960 pixels. Now we're adding a few more media queries, so I'll copy and paste these 2 more times. And for the next media query, we're having a min width of 1216 pixels, and we're moving the max width to 1152 pixels. And then for our last media query, we're changing the width to 1408 and setting the max width to 1244 pixels. Now I'll also want to throw in some props. And what this means is if we go to, where is it at? Header. If we go to header right here, let's just say I wanted to create some exceptions. Typically with divs and class names, or if we're using Sass or CSS, we can throw in an additional class name and have it differ. But in styled components, what we could do is we can create props. Now, when we build layouts, you'll realize a lot of the time that containers have another option, which is a container fluid. And what container fluid does is allow us to stretch or change the width of the container to fit the browser to 100%. And that's an option we would want to have here. So for now, I am going to add this property of fluid. And the way to change the styles if that property exists is by doing the following. We'll add a $sign with the curly brackets, pass in props, and we'll want to access the props.fluid, and then the double and signs. And then with styled components, they have a CSS method we can use, which allows us to write additional CSS using the backticks. And then in here, we'll set styles dependent on if the fluid property exists. So we'll add a style of padding 0, margin of 0, and a max width of 100%. Let's go ahead and save that. And I just want to check if everything seems to be working. However, we are still getting errors due to the other components not being created yet. And we also need to import CSS. So we'll use destructuring to import CSS from styled components. But to test out this container, I am going to get rid of the other components that we have not made just yet. And I'll simply say hello here. Now we'll need to import the container from our global styles. So we'll do .styles. And we'll need to import it from global styles, and let's check if it's working. So if we refresh, you can see that right now we have fluid passed in, which makes the container 100%. But if we get rid of fluid, what should happen is hello should be pushed to whatever dimensions our browser is at, because the container is added. So the max width, I believe right now, let's check what I had it at. It's going to be around 1152. And if we get any smaller, it'll be 960. But you could see that we could determine styles. And so if you want a bit of a clearer example, let's set the background color here to pink. And the background color of our container is pink. However, when we switch this to a fluid, we'll switch the background color to blue. And so we'll need to add the fluid property in our container, which then changes the color to fluid and stretches the container to a full width. We don't need a container of fluid just yet for our header, so we can get rid of that. We can also get rid of the background colors because it's just example's sake. We'll need to bring back our other components that were commented out, and we can get rid of hello here. Now we're back to getting a bunch of errors because our components have not been created just yet. We'll go back to global styles and then work on our flex component. Our flex component is going to have a position of relative. It's going to have a display of flex, of course, because that's its sole purpose. And we're going to align the items to center. Now with flex, I do have a bunch of different properties we can pass because with Flexbox, as you know, there is the option to have the justify content, and you can set it to space between, around, center, etc. And you can also set the align items to either flex start and so on, really. So as I built this, I created a set of properties that we can add, and for now, I'll go ahead and add a few. So the first one we're going to add is a justify content of space between. And so I'll do one example and then I'll copy paste the rest because it's going to get redundant. So we'll do props. And if the flex has if the flex component has a space between property that we added, we will then add a justify content of space dash between. So if the flex component is similar to the container, gets the space between, justify content space between will be added. I'm going to fast forward this and add a few more. Okay, so I went ahead and saved, and what I added was a property of flex end, which justifies the content to flex end, a property of align top, which should align dash items set of flex start to top. And then finally, I added another one, which is no height, which just sets the height of our flex component to a height of 0. And this will come in handy here in a second as we go through and build our entire header. So the only thing we're going to use in our header for the flex is two props. We'll want to use space between because we're adding space between our logo and our menu. And we'll also want to add no height. And this is specific to the fact that when we are creating that canvas effect of erasing, we'll want to erase whatever's behind the header nav, which calls for the header nav not to have a height so that it doesn't block it. So we'll go ahead and save this, and we'll need to import flex from our global styles. Now we're going to add styles for our logo and our menu. So let's jump into header styles and do the following. And actually I did miss header nav, so I still have the background blue, violet, and the color of white, but we're getting errors for these two. So let's actually create these styles for this as well. We're setting the height to 0 pixels, the width to 100%, the position to an absolute position, a top of 72 pixels, a right of 0, a left of 0, and a z-index of 99. What z-index will do is bring the header nav from a perspective of z to the highest point so that it can be in front of any other elements. We're also setting position to absolute because we are going to lay it on top of our banner that we'll create later. And what I want to do actually, instead of not showing you the progress, is I'll go ahead and create logo and get rid of everything inside logo here, and create menu and remove everything in here as well. So in header.js, I will import logo and menu, which will just be basic divs because they do not have any styles added to them. But this will allow us just to visualize what's going on. So you can see that, hey guys, hope you're ready to learn, which is coming from the layout.js here is, or actually not the layout, but the index.js right here is on top. But that's because the logo and this menu button here, which is our header, is in absolute position. Okay, so this is how it currently looks with the container, the flex, and the header nav created, but it's not pretty, so let's keep going. Before we continue the styles for logo and menu, I do need to fix logo up a bit because it's not just going to say logo. Now logo is going to have a Gatsby link inside of it because it's going to link back to the home page. And so we'll set to, and this will link to the home page. We'll need to import link from Gatsby, so let's do that. And inside the link here, we're just going to write half of what the logo represents because there is that red circle that when we click on, will change the theme from a dark to a light theme. So we'll put FURRO here, and then we'll add a span tag, which will represent our red circle. And then we can throw another link, and we'll link this to our homepage, and this will contain the last letter, which is a W. So let's save that and head over to the styles. Now in the logo component, the A tag is going to represent the link or the Gatsby link. After all, it is just an A tag. So for the font size, we're giving it a font size of 1.8 rem, and this is relative to whatever amount of pixels we set on the HTML, which was 16 pixels. Setting the font weight to 800. And again, you can use whatever font you would like. I just went with the basic Apple system one. And if you're on Windows, you're going to be using Seago UI. So just keep that in mind. Our color is going to be whatever our theme's text color is. So let's get this going with props.theme.text. Now we also have that span tag, which is that red circle, and we'll set the height to 16 pixels. Or actually we can do 1 rem since it's already 16, and the width to 1 rem as well. And the background color is going to be the red, so EA291E. Now we are using this red in a lot of places, and so it's going to be annoying to keep copying this. What I will do is let's add this down here and change the text to red, and we'll copy this right here, go back into layout.js, and for both dark and light theme, we're going to have that red color, which is just going to represent the red that we had created. So let's save that, and back in the header styles, we'll change this red to the theme red. Okay, so save that. Next, we do have a margin of 0 pixels and 4 pixels for the left and right. Border radius set to 100% so that we can make it a circle. And the display is going to be an inline block. Position is going to be relative, and the bottom is going to be 2 pixels. Now this might differ depending on what font you're using, but for the Apple system fonts, the bottom of 2 pixels set it best for centering. Let's save that and take a look at what we have so far. So we've got our link here, and so if we click on FURRO, it will take you to the home page, but the red circle won't do anything just yet. The red circle should toggle the theme, which we'll set up here in a second. Let's continue on and build our menu. Now we've already created our menu styled component here, so let's start working on the styles. Inside the menu, we do have a button, and the button is going to have a transform origin of center, a border of none. We're going to add some padding of 20 pixels and a background of none. We're also going to give it an outline of none. And then inside the button, we do have span tags. And so what these span tags are going to represent is the hamburger menu or the line. So let's give it a width of 36 pixels, a height of 8 pixels, a display set to block, a background color, and the background color is going to be the same as the text prop. So we can honestly just copy paste that and change the color to background. Let's scroll down a bit. And lastly, we're adding a margin of 8 pixels. Let's save that and take a look at what we've got. Okay, so our hamburger menu is built out, and honestly, it looks pretty well. What I want to do next is create our context, which will have a global state, and the only global state we're going to track for now is just the current theme. And then from the current theme, it'll allow us to change between dark theme and a light theme. Now, the way I set up my context is a bit different, and I do actually like it a lot. There are several ways to handle global state. This is just one of those ways, and from my opinion, I do love its organization. So let's go ahead and set up the context, and we'll soon be done with part 2. So let's create a new folder, and let's call it a context folder. And inside the context folder, we'll create a global context.js. Now in global context.js, we're going to import React, and we're also going to import create context. We're also using a use reducer, and finally we need use context. And all this is being imported from React. First thing we need to do is we need to define the context. We'll create a variable for global state context, and we'll set that to create context. Now the use reducer is fairly similar to Redux. I won't explain too much, but I'll keep it kind of simple. There are actions that can be taken to update the state, and so those are called dispatches, which allows you to trigger a change in the state. Our dispatch is going to be, for now, just to update the current theme from a light to a dark and a dark to a light. Now with creating the global state context, we'll also need to create a global dispatch context, which will trigger the changes. Once we've defined the context, we need to create the reducer. So let's go and make a const global reducer. And global reducer will take a state and an action. And using reducers, we'll want to use a switch statement or like the case statement to execute different types of commands or actions. So we'll do switch here, and inside the switch, we'll have an action.type. And whatever we define the type from our dispatch or our action, will then cater to whatever is going to occur for the state. So the first one we're going to do is regarding the toggle theme. So we'll just do a case, and we'll capitalize this. Let's keep it all caps just for organization. And we'll call this toggle theme. And what toggle theme, and I have extra semicolon there. But what toggle theme essentially is going to do is just set the current theme to whatever action.theme represents. So whatever we pass in as our theme will then get updated to the global state's current theme. I also missed adding a return statement here. So it'd be case, if the case is toggle theme, we'll then return the current theme, whatever action theme we pass in. So this action part will be defined when we execute a dispatch. Now also need to use the spread operator to return the previous state. So we'll just do, now we haven't defined what state is, but getting ahead of myself, we are going to add a spread operator to return the previous state or the saved state. Now, typically there are defaults with switch cases, and defaults will tend to throw an error. If the case isn't defined, which is toggle theme, we'll just throw a new error, and we'll just say unhandled action type, and we can return whatever action type we specified through action.type. So our reducer is completely finished here, our global reducer. What we'll then need to do is create a provider. That way we'll wrap our Gatsby app with the provider so that we can then access it or consume it throughout the entire application. We'll do a export const global provider. And through this global provider, we'll want to access children. And children will then represent our entire Gatsby app. And we'll create an arrow function. And here's where we're going to define state. So we'll have state, and we'll also have a dispatch. And for this state that we find, we're going to use reducer, and we're going to pass in the reducer we defined, which is our global reducer. And then it's going to take in the initial state that we have. Now, current theme is going to represent the theme that we have. So we're going to use local storage, but we haven't set anything to local storage just yet. Which means by default, I'm just going to go ahead and set the current theme to dark. Now outside of our state, we're going to have a return, and we're going to return the global state context and the global dispatch context. and then wrap that with our children, which is our Gatsby app. So I'll go ahead and grab global dispatch context dot provider, and the value here will be dispatch, and then we can close that, and we'll do another one for our state. So global state context dot provider, and our value is going to represent state. And now inside all of this, we are returning children, which is our Gatsby app. Now for us to access these providers throughout our app, we'll create custom hooks to use them. So custom hooks to use dispatch and state. So we'll export const use global state context. This is just if we want to pull in the state data, and we'll say use context, and we'll say we're going to use the global state context, and I don't feel like writing again, so I'll create another one. And the use global dispatch context will only be used if we are trying to use the dispatch across our entire application. So the use context global state context, this is going to be switched to the dispatch context. Let's go ahead and save this, and nothing will happen just yet. But for us to see if this is working, we'll need to jump into the Gatsby browser.js, and in here we'll import React, and we'll also import that global provider component that we created. And in Gatsby, for us to wrap our entire application, we can use a custom function called wrap root element, which will allow us to wrap anything with our entire root element, like it describes. So export const wrap root element will pass an element. We'll use destructuring to grab element, which is our Gatsby app, and we'll return the following. So we'll return global provider, and inside global provider is where we're just going to return our app, which is element. Save that, and again, nothing happens just yet. But for us just to check if everything is working correctly, what we can do is we can go to header styles.js, and if we want to find out what our current theme is, what we can do is use global state context, because we aren't updating anything just yet. We just want to check what our current theme is. So we'll say use global state context, and we'll import this from the global context. Now to check the current theme, what we can do is use the structuring to access current theme, and we'll say current theme is equal to the use global state context right here. So to display this, what we can do is let's just console log. So console.log current theme. And if we open up the console, we can refresh and we get undefined. And the reason we're getting undefined is because the use global state context is a hook, which we need to add the double parentheses. So let's refresh, and you'll see dark in the console. Now, if we go to global context and change the current theme to light, you'll see the current theme is light. And so this current theme is being accessed from the header. However, the current theme lives in the global context, which is the global state, or the application's global state. So we'll leave this as dark for now. And if we go to the layout.js, let's split these up. We can close header styles. We can also close Gatsby browser because we're done with that. Let's keep open header.js and layout.js. Now I did mention that depending on what the current theme is, we want to switch between light theme and dark theme. So let's do that. In the theme, we want to access the global, or the current theme on the global context. To do that, we can do exactly what we did on header.js to console log it. So I will just copy what we have for our layout and add a context. And so we're importing use global state context. Let's make sure we're importing it from the right area. So we'll do context. Yeah, that's right. Okay. To use this again, we will, right here, we will say const use destructuring to access current theme. And we'll say use global state context. So right here in this theme prop that we have, we can say current theme is equal to dark we'll return the dark theme. Else we'll return the light theme. Oh, I forgot the question mark. So this is a ternary operator checking if current theme is equal to dark, return dark theme, else return the light theme. So let's save this and see what we've got. You can see that now we've switched to the dark theme. And that's because our current theme on the global state is currently set to dark. I said currently 100 times. But if we switch the current theme on our global state to light, it will go back to light. Now, how do we make this red X switch between the dark theme and the light theme? And that's what we're going to do right now. So we can go back to header.js only. And in header.js, we'll need to also bring in the dispatch because now we're updating the global state. So we can say use global dispatch context. And let me add a comment saying this is the context. And now we can create a dispatch variable, which is equal to the use dispatch context hook. Now on this span tag, we can pass in an onClick event handler, writing onClick, and then we will create a custom function that will say toggle theme. So let's go ahead and create that custom function right here. We can say const toggle theme. We'll do the following. So if current theme is equal to a dark theme, we'll use a dispatch and let's define the type. So the type that we were going to do is, if we go back to global context, the type that we currently have is toggle theme. So we can say the type that the type of action we want to take is to toggle the theme, and theme is then equal to light. So this other theme prop is the action. So what we have is action.theme. This theme represents whatever we typed in, which is light right here. So we can have an else statement, which will do the exact same thing, except set the theme to dark. So if the current theme is set to dark, we're going to switch it to light. And if that switches to light, we'll check again if the current theme is dark, which it isn't, it'll be light. It will switch it back to dark with the else. So let's take a look here. So right now the current theme is light. If we click on the red circle, it will turn it to dark. Clicking on it again will turn to light. Okay, so we've got that working, and honestly, it looks good. Now, by default, if we refresh, the theme is currently white or light. If we click on a dark theme and refresh, it will go back to light because that's what the global state is set to. Now what I want to do is set the current theme to local storage. What we can do is have a use effect hook. That is my cat's spells. What we can do is have a use effect. So we'll need to import a use effect hook like that. And then define use effect here. And we don't need a cleanup, but what we could say is window.localstorage.setItem. And the item we're setting is theme. And we're setting the local storage theme to whatever current theme is. Now we'll want this to run every single time the current theme changes. So with the use effect, we can use dependencies, which our dependency is going to be current theme, meaning this use effect will not run unless the current theme has changed. All right, so we're setting that to current theme. Now to access this and set it into the global context, we'll want to switch what our current theme is right here from light to whatever the local storage is. And to do that, we'll do window.localstorage. Instead of now set item, we'll say get item, and we're getting the theme. Now, if the theme is currently set to null, which means that nobody has visited this site yet, we'll automatically set it to dark by default. Else we're just setting to whatever the value of the local storage theme is. So we can just say window.localstorage.getItem, and we'll just say theme. Go ahead and save this and let's check if it's working. So right now the current theme is light. However, if I switch it to a dark theme and refresh the page, it will stay as a dark theme. Switching it back to the light theme and refreshing, it will stay as the light theme. Okay, perfect. So we've gotten down the global context with the current theme working. Now I will turn certain components for the header to a motion component through Framer Motion to add some animations. The only motion component that we're going to have is this header nav. So if we go to header styles, we can import Framer Motion. So we'll do import motion, and we'll import this from Framer Motion. And the way to turn a styled component to a motion component, but still have it be styled component, is to use styled motion.div, like so. And then in header.js, we can add any of the motion components that we want. So you'll notice that with the header nav, when the page loads, it flows in from top to bottom, which is a subtle animation. What we'll do is we'll create animate. And what animate's going to be is a Y of 0 and an opacity of 1. I'll copy and paste this one more time, but switch animate to initial and set the Y to 72 pixels, which will push it 72 pixels to the top, and have the opacity set to 0. If we save this and take a look, let's refresh. Okay, so you can see that it actually goes up instead of down. And that's because we need to switch it to a initial of -72. So now when we refresh, the header comes down. And then we can switch it to white, we can switch it to the light theme. But I don't like the default easing that Framer Motion gives. It's too springy in my opinion. And to change that, we'll just pass in transition. And we'll also want to switch the duration. Set that to 1. And then ease, we can create our own custom ease. So we'll add a 0.6, 0.05, a -0.01, and a 0.9. Go ahead and save that, and let's take a look at our animation. So it's a lot more subtle now and nicer in my opinion. All right, cool. So we made a lot of progress in part 2. Going over the things we covered, we created global styles in our layout.js, added normalize, created the theme provider, as well as created the dark and the light theme. And then in header.js, we coded out the JSX, as well as created global styled components and header styled components. We set up the context, and we created a current theme to where we can toggle back and forth between light theme and dark theme, as well as store it to local storage. Finally, we topped it off with adding Framer Motion for subtle animations of our header. Tune into the next episode where we're going to start adding the custom cursor as well as the different hover effects for our cursor. As always, if you did enjoy this, please leave a like and don't forget to subscribe, and have a wonderful day.